So we've heard from our first group of speakers for this session this afternoon. I'd like to bring all of the speakers back now into the room where we can just start to have a bit of a panel discussion. Obviously, there's huge different perspectives from the group coming at this one topic from a range of different angles. So I just want to kick off. And by the way, if you do have questions for our amazing panel here today, please do put them in the chat and we will be able to pick those up and ask them to this panel and to the panel that we're having on later this afternoon. One of the things that I guess has come up and one of the kind of themes, I guess, that transcends a lot of what's been discussed today is around SDGs. So the Sustainable Development Goals that the UN has set. So the targets for 2030, and really looking at the face of consumer behaviour and dietary choice. I'd just like to get the perspective really from Edinburgh Social, just to kind of hear your perspective about how does your sort of, you know, localized operation fit perhaps into what is a macro global goal? Because that's, I think some of the examples you shared there was a real illustration of some of these big picture goals that we all have now with the SDGs kind of being facilitated at a local level, which is quite inspiring. So I wonder if you could just expand on that for us.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's always a case of trying to, you know, digest and break down these goals and seeing how you can make them, how you can adapt them to fit into your own programs, you know. And I guess that's something that we're always kind of focused on, you know. So it's maybe not necessarily always something about sharing that kind of global strategy with our young people, but it's certainly kind of distilling some of that down into messages that we can share with them, and then encouraging them to share that message further, you know. So I guess that's, you know, trying to kind of cascade it through the communities kind of that way. So, but certainly, yeah, we're we're certainly kind of committed to supporting in any way we can to deliver those goals.
Thanks, Steve. I want to bring Ruth in as well, because Ruth, I know you touched on the sort of commitment from the NFU to net zero. How challenging is it then with your associate members from the NFU to, I guess, reach those SDG type goals that we're talking about? And, you know, how easy is it with all the other challenges that these businesses, these farmers have? How do you motivate them at that macro level with SDG goals as well?
I think that's the $1 million question, to be honest with you, Helen. And if I'm being really critical, I don't think the SDGs have a fantastic effect by policymakers within the UK. We're seeing individual businesses take those up and be very clear about what their ambitions are with those SDGs. And the SDGs provide an excellent framework to be able to be working across the piece on those real priority issues. And whilst we see that transcending and sort of being targeted to individual businesses and private businesses choosing to do that, I don't think we've really necessarily seen that done on a macro level within the UK. And certainly that sort of challenge hasn't been taken up by government particularly well, certainly not in comparison to some of our counterparts on an international platform. So I think until that happens, and until policy, which is changing dramatically and farmers at the moment, is sort of embedded with the SDG framework, I think it's very difficult for them to do that. They definitely will be contributing and will be aiding those, but in terms of that particular framework, I think it's quite difficult.
Thanks, Ruth. Mfuzi, I would like to just hear from the FAO just really on those sustainable development goals at a macro level. How do you transcend, I guess, those ambitions for the likes of the FAO and the work that you do? Can that be done?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Helen, for the question. Probably the presentation I made, we are guided by the big sustainable development goals, but I need to mention that as FAO, our number one partners are the farmers, especially the small scale farmers. So if we are in a panel with organizations like the organization that Ruth is running, these are exactly our clients. So we work at micro level. So that is what the organization is insisting, working at micro level and providing technical support, especially to small scale farmers, because our mantra as the UN is we need to leave no one behind in the move towards ending hunger and malnutrition. So even though I presented this big picture sustainable development goals, the way we approach our work is at grassroots farmers level. I think this is very important, and under the mantra of leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can ask you, I guess, from IntelliDigest perspective, obviously with the tool that you've launched today, this very much does fit in with the SDGs. What's your challenge next, therefore, for this this new launch today?
So, you know, what's the challenge? The challenge is that we need to work with grassroots. We need to go down into the rural areas, you know, into the urban areas, and work with people, and then, you know, be able to capture this data and make it available for use. And we know that's a big challenge because, you know, we don't have internet facilities in most of the remote places, so we need to engage. So ultimately, we have to, you know, be able to collaborate with different representatives of these people in the grassroots level to be able to capture that data and get that information. And that's one of the key challenges we'll be tackling in the near future. And ultimately, you know, creating wider awareness of why, you know, these different local groups will need access to the right technology and to engage meaningfully and be able to benefit from wider solutions that could impact their life is very important. So not only are we capturing the data, we're also going to be a voice for these local communities so they can also have access to some technological advances that improve the overall livelihood. So you want to help them to feed better. We also want them to live a better life. So overall, engaging with urban societies, it is a lot easier because, you know, people have got the right internet access. Right.
Sorry, Ify, we're just losing your mic a little bit there, I think. Could you just say that last sentence again?
All right, thank you very much, Helen. I'm going to do that. So what I'm saying is that as much as we already part of the urban society where we have internet and facilities and people can easily sign up to this platform, we're also going to be going to the rural areas and engaging with people and working with local communities to bring them on board and for them to not just benefit from having a better access to food, but also be a voice for them so that they can also have access to other technology advancements that can overall improve their livelihood. So it's all about how can we help to really change the life of people and help them to have access to a better life.
Thank you. I think all of the panelists have touched on one area, which is about that sort of grassroots engagement that all of you in some way, shape or form are involved with, perhaps within your communities or the association that you operate in. And this is a discussion, a question to all of you, what is that biggest challenge in terms of engagement when it comes to food from a nutrition point of view, but also from a food waste point of view and from a production point of view? Where is that biggest blocker for your organizations at the moment at that grassroots level, I guess? And if I may, I'll start with Mfusi from the FAO on that one.
Yes, thank you, Helen, for the question. I think it's very pertinent. Well, I will say the greatest challenge we are having is data and creating the evidence. I think it's one of the Achilles heels really of the world. Because, for example, if I can just give an example of the post-harvest loss in the framework of Africa, the African continent committed to have post-harvest loss from the levels they were in 2015 to go down by half by 2025 as part of the Malabo targets. The SDGs also has some post-harvest loss targets towards 2030. But there is a big challenge of knowing what exactly is happening there. The post-harvest loss data is just not there. I think this is one of the greatest hurdles. And also, the data also speak to malnutrition issues. Where are the biggest challenges for interventions, for social safety nets that are really targeted to the people who need these services the most. I will say those are the biggest challenges. So once you build the evidence, the reliable evidence that has been tested, that is robust, you can then use that evidence to influence policy and political leaders to rally against it. But if you don't have the evidence, it's difficult to get political leaders to rally against these actions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to bring in Steve, because Steve, something you said, I guess it resonated with me a little bit just by being a mum, and I think it was something like nutrition by stealth or something like that. I often have to do that with my young too when it comes to vegetables. But just in terms of, I guess, engaging your local community, what's worked? What are still those big challenges that you're facing in terms of conversion, I guess?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, health by stealth. Yeah,
I like it.
well, yeah, and I should point out that as good, as useful a tool as that can often be, I think that if we have to hide beetroot inside chocolate brownies, then we're struggling a little bit. I think that also vegetables should be celebrated for what they are. But then I fully appreciate that sometimes it's a useful tool, but I think that it has to be a balance. I mean, for me, in terms of risks and things, it's it's convenience. It's convenience food. Food is absolutely everywhere now. It's huge food from nice people, and I think that the more hedge fund investors and things are behind food and profit and consumerism drives it, then it's a real issue, and for me it's the high salt, sugar, fat foods that are kind of starting to take over or have taken over our high streets, and those for me are the biggest risk, and if we lose a connection with food, then we're going to lose these stories. We're going to lose that connection, and how do we get back from there? So that's certainly what we're doing. We're all about sharing these stories and making sure that people still feel as if they're stakeholders in the food system, and I think that that's what we run the risk of losing at the moment.
Thanks, Steve. Ruth, I'm going to just bring you in, and I guess it's on a related topic really, but for your audience, based as from the NFU, where do you as the NFU kind of see those future trends heading? Obviously from the farming community, they need to plan way in advance in terms of future cultivation and things like that. So what do you see as the macro trends on the horizon for that industry?
I think that's a really good question, which takes a lot of thought and sort of data probing to answer. I think there will be a move or a push, probably is probably the word I would use, towards more sustainable food. But what that looks like and what that actually means could mean a range of different things to a range of different people. So, for example, if you take poultry, for example, actually, if you're purely looking at carbon and not sort of looking at animal welfare or sort of any other aspects within there, the most carbon efficient way to produce poultry meat is to intensively produce it in an indoor environment. So I think we need to sort of consider, as I mentioned within the presentation, everything in the round, and that's a really challenging, really difficult thing to do. I think we will see, and Steve sort of mentioned this earlier, some pockets popping up as a result of COVID for it to be, more local, perhaps more seasonal, and people sort of certainly in that more affluent end of society, really caring about and wanting that sort of niche product and wanting that story and wanting that reassurance and to know more about their food and more about the provenance. I do worry more about probably lower economics ways of society in terms of the food accessibility and the quality of that. You look at the Australian trade deal we've just done, actually you're talking about hormone-fed beef, you're talking about animal welfare practices that have been banned in the UK for 15, 20 years, which in 15 years' time we'll have free and frictionless trade and access to our market, while all of our retailers are sat there saying absolutely they won't source that and will continue to source British. Actually, the food service sector is going to be a very different place, and customers won't ask those questions. It's not transparent. So I think we will end up with more divergence, to answer your question, Helen. I think we'll end up with even more divergence than we've got now between perhaps bottom and top tiers of our society.
Thanks very much for that, Ruth. And I think it's an interesting point that you raised, because the question therefore comes, where does the responsibility for navigating these future trends actually rest? So we have these great SDG goals at a global level, and at a local level, just hearing from you, the panelists today, we can see that there are definite actions taking place at a regional and local level. But I can't help but feel if national governments are perhaps missing a trick, or whether we don't have enough of a strategic long-term direction that's properly thinking about this problem politically. I'll go back to you on that one, Ruth, just initially for your thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree, Helen. I think food is a funny being in terms of policy and in terms of where it sits within our government. We've got very sort of segmented sort of departments within government who work independently and don't come together to sort of discuss the big macro information and sort of evidence within their way of talking about Public Health England versus the FSA versus DEFRA. All of them work very much within silos, and there's sort of no one coming together to bring that together under one umbrella. Obviously, we've got the National Food Strategy happening at the moment. I just worry that's going to be so vast and so sort of, I guess, overwhelming in terms of its findings, that actually to pinpoint these specifics is quite difficult. And perhaps it needs a longer term look at it, whether that be a Minister of Food or somebody sort of bringing all of those departments and all of those themes and challenges together versus a one-off report.
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, definite food for thought there. I think, Ife, it would just be great to hear from you, just thinking about where trends are heading. And, with your food and waste tracker that you've IntelliDigest have launched today, how is digital? So given the fact that this is a week where we're looking at all things, in terms of how trends and things are going to change, where does digital sit, and how much is that potentially going to dramatically shift the food sector, do you think?
Well, thank you so much, Helen, for bringing that up around what impact can technology innovation drive for people around the consumer behavior and dietary choice. So at IntelliDigest, we understand that it's not all about technology innovation. There's need for capacity building. There's need not just that we creating awareness, but we're helping people take that next step to really doing what they need to do to address the challenges that they have been made aware of. So, and that's one of the reasons why we set up the Global Food Loss and Waste Tracker, because we just want to make it a lot easier to capture that data and insight. We also have a number of technologies in the pipeline, which ultimately is going to help people to recover value from inedible food waste, and ultimately provide sustainable chemicals that can be used in more localized production of food, and also helping to impact regenerative agriculture for the future. So it's not just, it's a combination of capacity building, awareness, and also technology innovation. Technology innovation on its own wouldn't solve all the problem, because people need to be educated, people need to be helped to take that next step, that leap to actually solving the problem. So this is where at IntelliDigest we do our best to provide knowledge action courses for stakeholders in the food system from farm to fork to understand that next step. And for us, how we do that is by working with them through their business model and their processes to understand that next gap which they need to fill, and also supporting them and providing them with a well global recognized award of accomplishment at the end of the day. And building on that capacity building, we also work with different organizations. Like I did mention earlier, we work with Science Technology Facility Center, which has been very supportive and helped us to develop and launch this global food loss and waste tracker. We're also being supported by Royal Academy of Engineering, and also we've got a number of support from Revolutionize London, which has got it at the apex of their own mandate to make sure that London becomes a circular city. And we're also working with different other organizations at national and international level. So how do we really help people take that next step? Now, we're creating awareness, but it's about taking that next step to really doing that tangible thing in your business, in your household, in your life, that's going to drive us change and make the food system more sustainable, as well as help in balancing the issues we have around consumer behavior and dietary choice.
Thank you, Ife. Well, what I want to do now is just sort of bring this initial session to a close and thank all of the panelists for their individual discussions and also this panel discussion as well. It's been hugely insightful for me, and I'm sure it has for you, the audience, too. So I'd like to give my thanks to Mumfusi, to Ruth, to Steve, and to Ife for this session today.